The goal for today is to learn the language of Dubsado in regards to client management. Obviously, Dubsado is a client management platform, so we want to make sure that we understand the language that Dubsado uses when you're doing your managing inside of the system. And the other goal is to know the differences and connections between clients, projects, leads, and jobs, because there are a lot of differences, but at the same time, they are all intertwined and connected. And so it's appropriate to know how to use these effectively. So we're going to start off with clients. It's the best place to start with to get a good understanding of what a client is in Dubsado. The term client in Dubsado is any contact that you've added into the system. So a big misconception, and I have this written at the bottom, but I'll just talk about it here. A big misconception in Dubsado is that the term client is only referencing someone who has booked with you. And especially with people who are brand new to Dubsado, they see the term client and think to themselves, okay, so a client is somebody who books with you, because that's common language just in the business realm. But in Dubsado, the term client just simply means a contact that you have in the system. And a client in Dubsado is identified by their email address that you add them into the system with. And so we're first going to look at the address book in Dubsado, because that's going to be the contact list where you'll see everybody that you have in the system, or all of the clients that you've added into the system. So let's jump into Dubsado here, and we're going to talk a lot more about the projects page in just a little bit. But before we really get into all of this, I want to take you guys to the utilities section over here on the left-hand side, and then underneath the address book. So the address book in Dubsado, like I said, is just a basic contact list of all of the clients that you have in the system. So you can think about client and contact as the same thing. If you have your phone and you go to the contacts page and you see all the people that you have in there, those are clients in Dubsado. So as you can see here, I have my client list. Everyone who's in here, I have the email, phone number, any information that I need. You can also add address information, different things like that into each client. But this is where you're going to be able to see all of your clients. And up at the top up here, you can see where it says add client. So you can always add somebody in here. If you're on a paid subscription with Dubsado, you can click the import button and you can import a CSV file of a client list into Dubsado if you would like to. So that way you can do more of a bulk import versus one by one. But this is your contact list. It's just a list of everybody that you have in the system. Let me go through here. I just want to make sure that I cover some of these other points. So the address book in Dubsado is a contact list that will keep track of all the clients that you have in the system. In the address book, you can keep anyone's contact in hand if you would like to. That means that it could be people that you're working with directly. It could be people that you're working with indirectly. Sometimes people like to put, if you're maybe in the wedding industry, if you have vendors or if you have subcontractors that you want to have their information on hand, you can add them to your address book even if you're not working with them directly. And then the other thing that you can do is you can also add in personal contacts. So if you just want to have, let's say like your mom or your dad or anybody else, you can add them into the address book. That way you can keep them on hand. And remember, client is a contact in our system. So now let's talk about projects and how projects fit into this. A project in Dubsado is like a folder for a client based on the service you are providing or the product that you are selling. So let's say that I'm working with a client, and a client that I have, I want to do a service with them. Let's just say that I am a coach and I have somebody in my address book that I want to work with. You want to set them up with a project. The reason why is because all communication in Dubsado flows and runs through a project, sending emails, sending forms and contracts, invoicing, running your workflows, completing tasks for that specific service or product that you have. Everything that comes from a communication standpoint is all done through a project. So if we go to the projects page here, anytime you're working with someone, you want them to get set up with a project because there's no other way that you can communicate with them, invoice them, run your workflows, anything like that. So the difference between the address book and the projects page is the projects page here should be for the clients or the contacts that you're actually going to be working with and doing work for them. Not every client needs to have a project. Like I said, if you have your mom or dad or someone in there who's just a personal contact, you don't need to set up a project or a folder for them. But the people that you are working with, you want to set them up with a project. And one thing I want to say here is there are two different types of businesses. There's project-based businesses, and there's also client-based businesses. Project-based businesses, you're looking at more of the design realm. If you are a photographer and you have sessions, those are kind of projects that you're working on. But then there's other types of businesses that would consider themselves client-based. So you have coaches, anyone who's in the potentially like the virtual assistant realm where they're working with actual clients and they don't really consider themselves a project-based business. One thing that can really help out with that, and I usually encourage people to look at the term projects a little bit differently, is that a project is like a folder for that client. So let's say you have a filing cabinet and you open that up and it's filled with different folders. Those are your projects, and you can put a client's name on that folder, and that's where you're going to keep your invoices, your contracts, all of the different things that you need to get done are all contained inside of that project or that folder. So even if you're not a project-based business and you consider yourself client-based, just think about a project as a folder for that client, okay? So let me jump in here and kind of go through a couple of these points. Once a client has shown direct interest in working with you, so you have a client that reaches out to you and says, hey, I'm really would love to work with you. I've seen some of your work. It looks awesome. I would love to, find out more about what it is that you're selling or providing. A project should always be created at that point, and that will make more sense once we get into leads and jobs. But you always want to make sure that as soon as someone shows direct interest and says, hey, could you send me more information about X, Y, or Z? Or, hey, I would love to get on a call to talk to you more about your products or services. At that point, you should be creating a project, because at that point, you're going to be sending them more information, emailing them, maybe sending out a scheduler template. You're going to run a workflow, or maybe you go straight to an invoice. So at that moment, as soon as they show interest, that's when a project should be created in the system. And that will make more sense, like I said, a little bit later. So when setting up a project, what you're going to do is you're going to assign one of your clients from the address book as the primary client here. And let's say I'm going to be working with someone, and just so you guys can get an understanding of how the projects work, let's say that Becca, she's a booked job that I already have, but let's say that she wants to work with me again. What I can do here is if I click new project, I'm actually able in this client drop down to select from my address book. So what I'm doing here is I'm basically taking out a new folder and writing a client's name on it that I already have in my address book. So I could go here, I could click on Becca, and I could say, we'll just call this new project. And I can title that, and we'll talk about project statuses here in just a little bit, but I can make her a new lead that I have in the system. So we're just gonna create this here. And what you'll see now on the projects page is I have a project for Becca here, and then on the leads page over here, and again, we'll get into this in just a second, you'll see that I have another project. So the big takeaway here is that a client can have multiple projects underneath their name. This is great for, let's say, photography. If you do a maternity session with somebody and then also do a newborn session, you can have new folders for every single project that you're working on, or every session. If you're a coach, let's say that you do a 6-month training program with someone, and then after that 6 months, they say, hey, I would like to do another 6-month program. You could create a new project for that client or a new folder, and that way they have different folders underneath their name. So a client can have multiple projects attached to their name. The next thing here is that inside of a project, so I'm going to go into one of the ones that I have here. We'll just click into Becca's. So inside of a project, and if you're new to Dubsado, I'm just going to give you a quick rundown here. This is why you need to have a project set up, because once you go into a project, this is where you can do your emailing. You have your invoices tab, your forms tab where you can send forms out. You can keep track of your appointments, your workflows running here, and tasks or notes that you need to keep. So again, using that folder analogy, this is where everything is kept inside of that folder, is in this page here. You can keep track of your contracts, all of that good stuff. But with each project, you can have a primary client that's attached to the project. This is going to be the main client that's attached. And then if you open up the client pencil here and to edit the information, you can also add in an alternate contact to go with this particular product or service that you're working on. So you can always add an alternate contact to go with the project, but at the very minimum, you always want to have a primary client attached to that particular project. So that's how you can think about projects. You can have a maximum of 2 clients on a project, your primary, and then also your additional contact or your additional client can go onto a project. We are working on a way for you to add more clients to a project, like vendors and different things like that, but we don't quite have that in the system yet. So the primary client is going to be the person that you are doing the most communicating with. And the reason why you want the person that you're communicating with the most to be the primary client is because with workflows, once you get to that point with workflows, workflow emails can only send to the primary client right now. So in a system, let's say you have a workflow running and it's sending out all of this different information. Right now, it can only send to the primary client. So if you're a photographer and you do headshots, that's very simple because you're only working with one person. So of course, they're going to be the primary client. But let's say you're working with a company or you're working with, multiple people on a certain project. You always want to make the primary client the person that you're going to be communicating the most with. And again, it all ties back into the workflow, because once you get there, all of those workflow emails at this point in time can only send to the primary client. So you want to make sure the person that you're talking with the most is the primary point of contact on there. And again, you can add in an additional contact if you want to. You can email them manually. But right now, automated workflows can only go to the primary client. And like I said earlier, a client can have as many projects as you see underneath that client that you would like. Let's talk about project titles here, because project titles is something that kind of gets overlooked, but as far as organization, it can really help you out on your projects page. The project title should normally center around what service you are doing for the client, or it could be the product that you're selling. So for example, maternity session, logo design, 6-month coaching program. If we go to a projects page here, we'll just take a step back. You can see here that I have a logo design or rebranding or a web project. The project title over here should always center around what it is that you're doing for the client. What service are you providing? Like I said, 6-month coaching program or a maternity session. It should always identify what it is that you're doing for them. If we go to the outline here, there's a couple other points that I want to make that's kind of just some keys for you. You don't have to do these things, but it is good to know that this affects other areas in the system. So due to the searching functions in Dubsado, it may be beneficial for some businesses to add the client's name into the title. You don't have to do that, but some places where you'll do searching in Dubsado, it will only pull up the project title. And if you have the same project title for everybody, then you're not going to know which one it works for. So if you have 6-month coaching program for all of your clients that you have, and then let's say you're going into the calendar and you have something on here. Let's say we go here and click on something, or actually let me go back really quickly to the calendar. Or actually a good way to do it would be with tasks, and I can show you here. This will be a lot more straightforward. So if you're creating a task, what it's going to do is it's going to ask you which project do you want to assign this task to. If all of your projects are named 6-month coaching program and you click this drop down, that's all you're going to see is just 6-month coaching program 1,000,001 times, and you have no idea who it's for. So in this situation, you would want it to be set up where you might have the name in there. What I have is the name of the company. So like Stark Industries, for all of you Marvel fans, if you have that in there, then you can identify a little bit better who it's for. So something to indicate who you're doing this project for in the title. There are some different places in the system where it might be beneficial if you add tasks this way. What I was going to show you, I just don't have an event on there. But if you have a project that you want to, or a appointment that you want to reassign who it goes to or what project it's on, things like that, it's going to give you this project drop down, and it helps to know who you're assigning it to. So including a name or the company name, something in there will help you identify what project it's going to go with. The other reason why project titles are very important is because if you're using a client portal, inside the client portal, the project title is going to be how the client identifies which project they're going into. So if I had something on my projects page where I named it new project and I just left it there, if I were to go into this client's client portal, the title here would be visible to them. So that's why I always encourage people to develop a naming convention that you're going to use for every single project, whether that in this case is the company name and then what you're doing for them. So Cyberdyne Systems, logo redesign, Stark Industries, logo design project. You want to come up with the same naming convention for every single project, so that way it looks more organized and you can actually see, okay, so this is what I'm doing, this is who it's for, and when they go into their client portal, the titles here are going to be visible, so don't name anything really crazy that only you know what it means if you're using the client portal, because they'll be able to see that. So definitely coming up with your own naming convention is crucial in the system. Okay, and now we're going to talk about leads and jobs and how all of that ties into the picture. So each project or folder, however you want to phrase it, each project can be assigned a specific status on your projects page. The two primary status categories on our projects page are leads and jobs. And so if I go to my projects page here, up across the top, you'll see these two main categories. I have my leads over here and my jobs over here. So each one of these projects can have a certain status attached to it. It can either be a lead project or it can be a job project. And that's very important because how you organize this page is going to help you determine to see who it is that you're working with. So let's talk about leads and jobs. Projects that are in the leads section should represent projects that have not booked with you yet. So that means that you might be waiting to have a discovery call with them. You've sent out a proposal to them, but they haven't approved it yet. All those different steps that you have in your process where they're still kind of in that communication phase, you're pitching your pricing, trying to get an understanding of what they're interested in. Anything that's in that kind of realm is going to be a lead project. It's going to be in the lead status area. And then everything that's in the job section, that should represent projects that have booked with you. So that means they've signed a contract or they've paid a deposit. Maybe they pay the whole thing at one time. Usually if they make a payment or a contract being signed, those are kind of the indicators in business that they're booked with you. But maybe you have different ways of kind of acknowledging, okay, this person is a booked job. So the job section, and you can kind of see the difference here on my leads section over here. The status is assigned the leads over here for these projects. Everyone here has not completed a contract or made a payment yet. I have some contracts that need to go out still. This contract has been sent, but it hasn't been signed yet. So every project that's over here in my leads area, they have not booked with me. So if I'm doing my client management, I can always see from clicking on my lead status who I still maybe need to follow up with. We'll get into that actually next week. We're going to do a continuation of this webinar next week. But if I click on my job section over here, now you can see that I have signed contracts, they've made payments. So everyone who's in the job status over here, at the very minimum, should have a contract signed, an invoice paid. So that way I can keep both of those two types of projects separate. And that's by the way of the status over here. And how it should work in the system if you're doing it correctly. And again, part 2 next week, we'll really get into the automation side of things and all of that. But it should be where they start off as a lead project. And then once they've gone through these certain milestones that it takes to become a booked job, you can update their status over here into a booked job, and that will move it from this section over into another section. One thing that I have seen people do is that, let's say Travis Kelsey, that he decides that he wants to sign with me. Some people will go in and they'll create a new project as a job, when all they really need to do is update the status of that project to now being they are a booked project. So let me jump back over here and kind of communicate this piece of it. Projects should be making a transition from a lead over into a job once they decide to book with you. So how to break down leads and jobs is you can either have lead projects or they can become job projects, but you need those projects regardless of what happens. Some people think I only want a project to get created if they're a booked job. I usually recommend as soon as they're interested in working with you, create a project at that point and then assign it a lead status. So that way, all the things that need to happen in that lead moment, discovery calls, pitching your pricing, sending out quotes, the emails back and forth, you already have a project created during that phase of the process. And then once they become a booked job, then you can continue the process, send out the onboarding information, welcome packets, all of that. But you still have the proposal, you still have all the emails, everything is contained inside of that one folder. If you had a filing cabinet and you have, let's say, someone who's interested in working with you, once they sign with you, you wouldn't grab a new folder and then, start a new process there. You would just continue to use that same folder as long as you're doing that particular service. So that's how everything is connected. And to kind of sum it up here, and then I'll open it up for some questions, is a new client demonstrates that they're interested in working with you. You set them up with a new project with a lead status, sign for payment, or how you can update the status of that project or folder to a job project. So that's how you can really break down your projects page so that you have people in the right areas. With our one-on-one calls that we do, there's a lot of times where people in the lead section will have invoices here that have been paid or contracts signed, and they just let their lead section build up and they haven't even used their job section. So if there was a takeaway from this webinar, and if you guys want some homework or just some things that you want to do over the weekend, I would go into your projects page and just make sure everyone is in their right section. If they're a lead, put them in the lead section. If they're a job, put them in the job section. And that way, when you come into Dubsado, this is going to be where you do all of your day-to-day management, is the projects page. So the more organized you can make this, the better off you'll be. So that way you can say, okay, who are all of my jobs that I'm working with? Boom, they all line up there. And then you can see who all of your leads are.